A. Drew asks, and by the way, he's the guy who does every now and then there's he does like a cartoon of secular talk. He does these awesome animations. And, you know, when he makes the next one, I'll make sure to tweet it out so everybody can see it. But he does, it's awesome. He just sent them to me one day, and I was like, holy shit, this is fucking crazy. But anyway, A. Drew asks, how do you feel about Bernie continually going on CNN and all the cable networks? Does he still need these cable networks? And how can Bernie and Justice Dems avoid being shunned by the corporate media like in the previous election? Okay, so that's a good question, and my answer to it is, at this point, I don't even mind if corporate media shits on Bernie and Justice Democrats, because the real enemy of Bernie and Justice Democrats would be indifference from the corporate media. So in other words, if they don't cover us at all, that's the real enemy, because then the word doesn't get out there. But they're also just so hacky, and they suck at their jobs so much that even if they were to cover us and disparage us, in the process of disparaging us, they would make us look wonderful. So, and this is also what happened with Trump, by the way, to a large extent, is that Trump is a disaster. Everybody knows that. He's horrendous. But the way that corporate media attacked him was always a way that was so unpalatable that, if anything, it made him look good. Like, one of the ones that sticks out in my mind is when other Republicans and corporate media covered his, his speech where he said TPP is gonna rape this country, and they focused on the fact that he said the word rape, and they were like, "Oh my God, they already used the word rape. That's so crazy." And think of the victims of rape. And basically, my contention is everybody else in the country understood. He's saying, yeah, TPP is horrible for this country. It's going to outsource your jobs. And when you attack him over something like that, that just makes him stronger. You know, another one is when they ran that commercial of him cursing nonstop. Okay, that's when regular people look at it and go, yeah, where's the outrage? I curse. I don't see what the big deal is. So the way corporate media attacks him is so shitty that it makes him stronger. Well, I think the way corporate media would attack, at this point, Bernie Sanders or Justice Democrats, it would just make us stronger. So the real enemy is indifference. All right, next question. What's your opinion on George Soros? That's from Paul A. He asked that question. There's two answers to that. One of them is I despise him because I despise all big money donors in politics. I don't think we should have any big money donors in politics. I think we should have clean elections by law and get money out of politics. So I don't like him in the same way that I don't like the Koch brothers, in the same way that I don't like Sheldon Adelson. I don't like people who basically control our politicians. On the flip side, there's so much made about George Soros on the right that they've unquestionably made him into a bigger boogeyman than he actually is. So that's their go-to for everything. They think George Soros secretly pulls the strings of everybody on the left, and nothing could be further from the truth. We've been accused of taking money from George Soros. I've, of course, never taken a dime from him. TYT has been accused of taking money from George Soros. They've never taken a dime from him. There's a lot of left-wing groups that have been accused of connections to him, and they don't have connections to him. So this idea of him as like the ultimate puppet master is just simply not true. Now, is he involved in political causes? I'm sure he is. Does he donate money to politicians and to some political groups? I'm sure he does. Do I like that? Of course I don't. But there's such maligning of him and only him from the right that it almost makes you go, oh, come on, like, you guys need to broaden your horizons here and do more research and figure out that the problem isn't just George Soros. The problem is the entire system that allows billionaires and corporations to corrupt politicians. So I don't like him because I don't like big money donors in politics, period. But on the other hand, is there too much made of him specifically? And do people on the right make it too personal, like he's the sole boogeyman? Yes. All right, next question. What is the long-term plan to keep JD, Justice Democrats, from becoming like the DNC? That's another great question, and unfortunately I missed who asked this one. I guess that was a mistake here, but the answer to that is pretty simple. Look, it's baked into the cake of where we get our funding. And that's the big point. Like, I don't want anybody out there to trust me, to take my word for it. Actions speak much louder than words ever could. So the proof is in the pudding. I like how I'm using all these like funny cliches. In other words, our candidates do not take any corporate money and do not take any PAC money. The logic of that is if they don't take corporate money and they don't take PAC money, well then who are they going to be responsive to? They're not going to be responsive to corporations and they're not going to be responsive to PACs. They're going to be responsible to you, the people, because the people, regular people, are our donors. And there's a hard cap of $2,800 per donation. That's the legal cap, $2,800 per donation. But our average number is probably somewhere around Bernie Sanders' number of $27, per donor. So I don't even want you to trust us. I want you to hold us accountable. And in the process of holding us accountable, you'll realize, oh, these guys are the real deal. Because since we only take money from regular people, we're representing regular people, which is why all of our candidates support Medicare for all and free college and a living wage and getting money out of politics and a New Deal. So again, it almost has nothing to do with trust. It has to do with what's the funding structure you've set up, and then as a result of that, what are the policy positions of your candidates? You have to pledge to take no corporate money and no PAC money when you become a Justice Democrat, and that's what keeps them honest. That's what makes it so that they're only going to represent you, and the second they stop representing you is the second I come out here and start shitting on Justice Democrats. So, again, the simple answer is it's baked into the cake of how we do it. It's in the structure of how we do it. I wouldn't even want candidates who seemingly are correct on all the issues, but they're also taking corporate and PAC money, because if they're taking corporate and PAC money, it seems like it's just a matter of time until they start representing their donors, corporations and PACs and wealthy people. So that's the only way, in my view, that we can keep them honest, is to make the funding structure in a way that they have no choice but to be honest, and that's the way they're incentivized. Okay, next. Funny, another George Soros question. Would JD ever take money from George Soros? The answer to that is no, because from my understanding, whenever he does donate to people involved in politics, he donates a tremendous amount of money. Like I just said, we have an individual cap of $2,800 on every single candidate, because we don't take corporate money and we don't take PAC money. If somehow George Soros donated, under the individual cap, if he donated $27 to one of our candidates, yeah, why not? But he's a big money donor, and we don't have big money donors by how we crafted Justice Democrats. So likely the answer is no there. Would you and JD consider working with Represent.us? The answer is yes. The answer is yes, and we have worked with many other populist left groups on the People's Platform, for example. Brand New Congress, National Nurses United, Democratic Socialists, People for Bernie, Our Revolution, Fight for 15. The list goes on and on. In fact, Represent.us might already be on that list. The person continues here. They stand for getting money out of politics, through the people instead of Congress. However, they still have the same goal in mind as JD, which is to get money out of politics. So again, my approach to this and Justice Democrats' approach to this is we support any and all avenues to get money out of politics. That's our stance, and we're going to work with anybody who wants to get money out of politics by any avenue. That being said, I do think certain ways are more likely to succeed than others. And this is absolutely nothing against the good people at Represent.us. I have nothing but love and respect for them. But strategically speaking, the best way to actually accomplish the goal, in my opinion, is to get a constitutional amendment to get money out of politics. Now, why is that? Because the Supreme Court ruled in various cases from the 1970s and onward until today. There's been 4 or 5 cases on money in politics, and they've basically ruled that money equals free speech. So when the Supreme Court rules that, what they're saying is, basically, you have a constitutional right to money being free speech. So that means you can spend unlimited amounts of money on politicians and politics, and nobody can restrict that because that's the ultimate law of the land in the Constitution. That's the way we are interpreting the Constitution. So since that's the case, if you have at a local level or at a state level attempts to regulate money in politics or get money out of politics, again, I support those 100%, but just understand you're basically trying to do reforms that the Supreme Court has already ruled are null and void the second you implement them. Because the way the Constitution works, there's the supremacy clause of the Constitution, and that means federal law overrides state law, and they've already said that federal law is money equals speech. So when you go to the state and say, hey, we just passed a law that says money is not speech, effectively, the state can just ignore it and say, hey, we're following the ultimate law of the land, which is federal law, and what the Supreme Court said. So in other words, what Represent.us and many of these other, money out of politics groups are trying to do is like the Supreme Court saying, and they did, hey, gay marriage is a constitutional right because of equal protection under the law. And then a conservative group says, I don't agree. Now I'm going to go into Mississippi and try to pass a state law that says gays can't get married. Well, you would go, that doesn't, okay, so if you get that passed, gays can still get married because federal law is now gays can get married, and that's the interpretation of the Constitution that is law of the land. So it doesn't matter if you say, hey, in Mississippi, gays can't get married, because they're going to say, yes, we can, watch us. Because, again, federal law is supreme. So when you try to do that with money in politics, it's the same dynamic at work. Hey, we got money out of politics at the state level. Okay, but if you don't get a constitutional amendment to say money isn't speech, and you don't get a constitutional amendment to get clean elections, that can just be ignored, basically. So I support them because whatever they get done is a step in the right direction. Like anything that limits money in politics is a step in the right direction. But I just think certain ways are more effective than other ways. Okay, and then Legit British asks, what are your thoughts on the skeptic community's very poor coverage of right-wing fuck-ups? Okay, so that's an interesting question, and I don't exactly know who Legit British is referring to. So I'd be very interested to get, specific names. I mean, obviously, I assume Legit British is talking about the skeptic community on YouTube. I just don't know which YouTubers that are members of the skeptic community he's referring to, and which specific examples he's referring to of these people not necessarily being hard on Trump. But in general, so speaking broadly here, not about any specific YouTubers, if you're a skeptic, for God's sake, don't spend all your time talking about social justice warriors. Like, we get it. It's not that hard. Okay, there are snowflake college kids that want to ban speakers who disagree with them. And that's wrong and that's bad. We all agree with that. There, my commentary's done on that in a grand total of 10 seconds. But when you have, especially in the United States, a system where Republicans have control of the presidency, the Senate, the House of Representatives, most governorships, and most state legislatures, and they are running roughshod with a horrific agenda of, tax cuts for the rich and deregulation and taking an anvil to our healthcare system. Like, yeah, maybe you should be a little skeptical of literally the powers that be who are controlling the entire fucking country, and maybe take some time to bust up their bullshit. So, again, I don't know exactly who he's referring to, but to the extent that there are members of the skeptic community who have turned that skepticism solely on oversensitive college kids, you're kind of firing blanks. And I have to say, I do think, look, it's a product of really not reading about politics on a daily basis and being up on what's going on. Because to anybody who's reading about politics on a daily basis and getting into the details of the agenda of the Republican Party, for example, if you do that, then yes, I think all those skeptics would say, holy shit, look at what's going on over here. But that's a thing. Like, it requires a lot of work and attention to read all the articles and get all the information and then, debunk it and say, hey, this is why this stuff is bullshit that they're doing. It's much easier to see, some hot button story on Reddit or wherever about some asshole kids who are shutting down a conservative speaker and do a 30-minute diatribe about how horrible that is. And it is horrible, but to put all of your focus on that, or most of your focus on that, you're really missing the ball, because you should be focusing on the things, especially policy related, that are destroying people's lives.